Greetings, YouTube. I'm going to be linking today to a fairly long piece that deals with racism in America, and particularly how the race issue that we are dealing with that is not being discussed is the fact that racism is almost always talked about in America in terms of hurt white feelings. That everything has to be couched in terms that don't disenfranchise white people from the discussion, because as soon as they feel that they are being disrespected, which is a twisted and warped class and race framing anyway, the conversation shuts down. And the article quotes one line which is great. It says, "Why is it that when black and Muslim killers are portrayed as thugs and criminals in the news, while white shooters are seen as mentally ill?" Now that quote, it was actually a headline, I believe, is supposed to be saying that we treat black people and white people differently. We treat Muslims and white people differently. Yes, I know that Muslim is not a race, but we do treat Muslims as a minority group, mass group. We treat black and white people as groups as well. And even in that line, they refer to the Muslims and black people as shooters, killers rather, while they return to white people as shooters. And a shooter is a much more neutral language than killer. You just shoot something, that doesn't mean you've hurt anybody. It just means you just shot something. You discharged a firearm. Could have been an accident. But killer is loaded. Literally. I've been racist in my life. I've made racist jokes. I've used racist language. I have maintained racist thoughts in my head without being aware I was doing it. Race wasn't something that even entered my lexicon, really. It entered my world as a concept until I was in my 20s. Why? Because the privilege of my skin allowed me to never have to think about it. Because as a white, straight male, I am the default setting. I am American. I have everything tuned to easy. I never have to think about walking in public alone. I never have to look at a cop and question whether they're going to beat me. No one's going to question if I'm alone in a neighborhood at night. Ever. And I've walked through a lot of neighborhoods at night in my youth. I used to roam ceaselessly when I was a young person because I was trying to grip with things, to get a grip on things inside my head, and I didn't know what to do. So I prowled the city in the dark. No one ever questioned it. In fact, the only time a cop ever asked me anything was when it was pouring down rain and he wanted to know if I needed a lift. And I said, "I'm 2 blocks from home, but thanks, I'm already wet." He laughed and he drove off. That's it. That's the only interaction I've ever had with a cop while walking through neighborhoods in the dark. People of color don't have that list of memories. People of color have a much different worldview. And my privilege protected me from ever even having to think about race. And that's the definition of race. If it isn't a problem, privilege, if it isn't a problem for you, you're privileged. I never have to worry about getting my wheelchair from my car into a store. Why? I don't use a wheelchair. I have legs that work. I am not have any mobility issues at this point. That's a privilege as an able-bodied person. I'm not going to be worried that I'm going to get overlooked for a job because the person's concerned that I might get pregnant and they might lose some productivity. Why? I'm not a woman. I'm not going to get pregnant. That's my privilege as a male. And yes, people that are hiring others make those kinds of calls. Sometimes overtly, sometimes not. But if we don't stop worrying about hurt white feelings, We're never going to actually solve the racism issue in America. We're just going to keep glossing over it. We're not going to question when a completely and utterly honest, open, overtly racist white guy shoots down 9 black people. And that's seen as a abnormality. Oh, look at that. In actuality, black people and people of color are being killed every single day in this nation, a lot of the time by white authority figures. And I don't want to hear anyone tell me about black on black crime. Because guess what, folks? We have white on white crime at higher rates, and brown on brown crimes at higher rates, and Asian on Asian at higher rates than they do across ethnic lines. That's just the way it is. People kill those they live with, and near, and around, and interact with. And don't tell me, well, black people have a higher crime. No. Black people are arrested more, are charged more harshly, are tried and lose their cases more often, and are given longer sentences. That's different than them actually being greater criminals than white people. Because we know that black people and white people are committing crimes at roughly the same level. It's just that white people have the privilege that the black people are going to get the short end of the stick. And if you're wealthy, you have an advantage. And you can have different levels of this. You can be a wealthy black person and have an advantage over a poorer white person. But if you compare things on racial levels, well, then that's different. So don't compare apples to oranges. Compare apples to apples. I've seen this graphic of a homeless white guy sleeping on a bench, and it says how about him enjoying his white male privilege. Well, yes, if you compare that guy to a homeless black person, or a homeless woman, or a homeless black woman, guess what? That homeless white guy has got it better off. So if you make comparisons on the same level, this is armor. This is protection. This is privilege. And I'm having to come to grips with the fact of my own racist past. I was never a swastika-wearing thug. I didn't beat people of color in the streets. I didn't abdicate having them deported. My racism was more of the across-the-board American racism, where it's subtle. More of the New England racism, where I could just ignore the race problem because it didn't affect me. I didn't have to think about it. I could crack a joke now and then. It was no big deal. I wasn't racist. I looked at my father, who was, and well, I'm not him, but I was still being racist. And now he is no longer, and I am trying to come to grips with it. My father will probably never come to the grips with the more subtle aspects of his racist life. And that's okay. He's 77. And I don't know if those kinds of things or stuff he could handle at this point in life. But I'm 50. And I'm going to make damn well sure that I call myself on every single instance. That I make sure I watch every single thought and word I say until I finally expunge every last trace of racism inside me. But the first thing I have to do is come forward and say, I am a racist.